Thanks, Laura. Can I just check if we are live? Right. Okay.
All good.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Pratik Tandon, and I am a communications officer at the UN Environment Program World Conservation Monitoring Center, UNEP-WCMC, based in Cambridge in the United Kingdom. This webinar is organized by the Ecosystem Assessment Initiative at UNEP-WCMC, and through today's webinar, we aim to share country experiences in the dissemination and use of national ecosystem assessment findings. We will hear practical examples of how findings are being used in policy and decision making. And we will discuss how ecosystem assessments can have greater impact among governments, civil society, the private sector, and other stakeholders. Before we begin, I will briefly walk us through today's agenda. Next slide, please. Thank you. So first, we will cover a few housekeeping points, including interpretation arrangements. And then we will have Juanita Chavez from UNEP-WCMC delivering the opening remarks for the webinar, as well as briefly providing us with an overview of national ecosystem assessments. After that, we will move into our country case studies, and we are delighted to be joined today by speakers from Colombia, Grenada, and Thailand, who will share practical experiences on how ecosystem assessment findings have been used to influence policy, engage stakeholders, and support implementation. Following the country presentations, we will have a short interactive Mentimeter exercise to hear directly from participants and generate ideas for the panel discussion. We will then move into a panel discussion and Q&A session with all speakers. After that, we will have concluding remarks from Juanita Chavez. Next slide, please. So a few housekeeping points before we start. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared afterwards through the NEA Initiative website as well as through the UNEP-WCMC's YouTube channel. If you have any concerns about this, please let us know. All participants will remain muted throughout the webinar to ensure good sound quality. If you would like to ask a question during the webinar, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We encourage you to submit your questions to our panel members throughout the webinar, and we will aim to address your questions as many as possible during the panel discussion. If you experience any technical difficulties during the session, please send a direct message in the chat to Laura Mack from UNEP-WCMC's events team, and she will be happy to assist. Next slide, please. With regards to interpretation, today's webinar includes simultaneous interpretation in French and Spanish. To access interpretation, please click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar and select your preferred language channel. Please note that our speaker from Colombia will be speaking in Spanish, so please accordingly switch to the relevant interpretation channel during his session. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm now very pleased to hand over to Juanita Chavez, who is a Senior Program Officer at UNEP-WCMC and the project lead for the Ecosystem Assessment Initiative. Juanita leads the overall management and delivery of the initiative. And prior to joining UNEP-WCMC, she participated in the National Ecosystem Assessment of Colombia and also coordinated the fast track assessment for the Amazon region. Juanita, welcome to the webinar, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Pratik. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all, depending on where you are. I am very, very happy to be here with you today, colleagues, friends, and general public interest in ecosystem assessments. Just imagine trying to decide on a country's economy without having access to relevant data, including the country's income, assets, or debts. Decisions taking would be risky, inefficient, and maybe unsustainable. And for decades, many decisions and policies regarding nature have not been sufficiently based on science and other knowledge systems, and there's still a gap among science, policy, and practice. A national ecosystem assessment is more than a scientific or academic report. It is a country's reality check. It brings together the best available knowledge, scientific data, local expertise, and indigenous wisdom to answer fundamental questions. What do we have? What is changing? Why does it matter? And what can we do about it? These country-driven assessments turn complexity into clarity. They translate ecological change into information that policymakers, businesses, and communities can actually use. They help to see the true value of nature, not as just an abstract idea, but as a foundation for development and well-being. Decisions made without the right information, we risk solving one problem while creating another. National ecosystem assessments aim to change that. They make policy and decision-making more credible by grounding it in evidence. They make it more legitimate by incorporating different knowledge systems and stakeholder voices. And they make it more relevant by connecting environmental change to real societal priorities, for example, health, security, and economic growth. In other words, they help bridge the gap between science and action. But perhaps the most powerful contribution is that they shift our perspective. National ecosystem assessments empower governments to design smarter policies. They help businesses manage risk and seize opportunities. They support communities in protecting the resources they depend on, and they create a shared understanding, a common language that brings different actors together around a common goal. Producing an assessment is not the end. It's the true value that lies in its use. It must inform planning, guide investments, shape regulations, inspire innovation and transformative change. It must be communicated clearly, updated regularly, and embedded in decision-making processes. That requires commitment, not just from scientists, but from leaders, institutions, and society as a whole. National ecosystem assessments are about choices. They help us see the consequences of continuing on our current path, but they also illuminate alternatives, pathways to development that are not only economically viable, but environmental sustainable and social just. They give us the knowledge we need to choose widely. Today, I invite you all of these assessments to see these assessments not as technical exercises, but actually as instruments of transformation. They are tools for building a future where nature and people drive together. A future where decisions are informed, inclusive, and forward-looking. A future where no longer nature is taken for granted, but recognized as one of most valued assets. If you want to have more information about the National Ecosystem Assessment Initiative of UNEP-WCMC, you can go to the web link that is in the chat, where we have different technical reports of ecosystem assessments that the National Ecosystem Assessment Initiative has supported to conduct, different guidance documents, articles, and more. Thank you very much. Back to you, Pratik.
Thank you very much, Juanita, for that excellent opening remarks and telling us about the value of the national ecosystem assessments. We will now move into country experiences section of the webinar. And next slide, please. Our first speaker is Mario Murcia from Colombia. Mario will speak in Spanish. So for those who would like to follow in English or French, please ensure that you have selected the relevant interpretation channel. Mario is a biologist with a master in development practice and is currently a PhD candidate in management of technological innovation at Universidad de los Andes in Colombia. Drawing on more than 17 years of experience in biodiversity economy, Bioeconomy, green business, and nature based solutions. Mario has worked extensively with public institutions, research centers, and the private sector across Colombia. He is currently a consultant in bioeconomy and nature based solutions for the private sector through Colombia's main business association, ANDI. Mario also serves as professor at Universidad de los Andes and Pontificia Universidad Javeriana. I hope I'm doing justice to a bit of Spanish here. Uh, and today, Mario will share examples of how findings from the Columbia National Ecosystem Assessment have been used by the private sector and incorporated into broader policy and economic discussions. Mario, we are very pleased to have you today for the webinar. Thank you for joining us. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Pratik. Thank you, Juanita, for the invitation. And I start to talking in Spanish because I need to clarify many points and maybe get a find this in a better way. Ok, entonces si quieren cambiar ya a sus idiomas a inglés, a francés, puedo empezar. Entonces, ¿me ayudan con la siguiente, por favor? Diapositiva. The next slide, please. Ok, la idea del día de hoy es mostrarles cómo en Colombia esta evaluación nacional, como bien lo decía Juanita, no solamente quedó en un documento técnico académico y de hecho, digamos, muy usado en términos científicos en el país, sino que logró permear incluso hasta el sector privado. Y aunque soy profesor en estas dos universidades colombianas que mencionó Pratik, también trabajo con la Organización Nacional de Empresarios más grande que tenemos, que se llama la ANDI, y que representa más del 50% del PIB, y tenemos varios casos de cómo el sector privado ha logrado permear o de alguna manera atraer este tipo de información para mejorar su toma de decisiones. Next slide, please. En ese caso, la evaluación nacional empieza de alguna manera como sí un instrumento técnico, pero en estas interfaces ciencia política, nuestra principal preocupación fue cómo permear esto, infiltrarlo en las políticas, los planes, las agendas públicas primero, luego en el sector privado. Y en ese ejercicio, este tipo de evaluaciones han logrado tocar y de hecho generar un montón de directrices en el país. Next slide, please. En ese proceso, pues básicamente les voy a mostrar tres caminos que tomamos en este ejercicio. El primero es cómo la evaluación nacional empieza a tocar las normas públicas. Luego, cómo estas pasan a tocar los aspectos económicos, de productividad y de competitividad en el país. Y luego a ver ya cómo entran directamente en el tercer camino a permear directamente al sector privado. En este primer camino, next slide, lo que vemos es que efectivamente la evaluación nacional empieza a ser parte del plan de acción de biodiversidad o los planes y estrategias de biodiversidad que se actualizaron de acuerdo al marco Común Montreal. Y para Colombia, este primer insumo se vuelve trascendental porque aterriza toda la información que viene del marco Común Montreal, lo que se venía desarrollando como el anterior plan de acción de biodiversidad, y la evaluación nacional entra y conecta y empieza a cambiarse mucho del lenguaje, mucha de la forma como se interpretan las metas, los procesos y las formas de medición, y la evaluación nacional empieza a volverse un eje articulador. Tanto así que fue usada por varios de los institutos nacionales de investigación en Colombia para sustanciar o de alguna manera asesorar y guiar este plan de acción de biodiversidad y volverse un instrumento de política pública a nivel nacional. Siguiente, next slide. Acá también la evaluación nacional empieza a volverse parte de procesos de ordenamiento territorial, y vemos que hay una política en Colombia de gestión ambiental urbana que empieza a desarrollarse. Acá se generan otras estrategias de política nacional que les llaman biodiversidades o biodiversities en inglés, y este tipo de estrategias empiezan a buscar cómo desde la evaluación nacional y al entender los motores de pérdida de biodiversidad se requiere aumentar una estructura ecológica principal en las ciudades para mejorar el flujo de servicios ecosistémicos y mejorar la gestión sostenible de las ciudades, y de alguna manera el gobierno nacional toma este tipo de iniciativas y las convierte en una política pública utilizando la evaluación nacional como un eje articulador y estratégico en este proceso. Next slide. En otro proceso que es para nosotros uno de los de más orgullo y alegría es que efectivamente, de hecho acompañados por UNEP-WCMC, se logró desarrollar una evaluación de servicios ecosistémicos utilizando la herramienta Anchor, con la cual el Ministerio de Hacienda, que es el ministerio que maneja todo el presupuesto de inversión nacional, hace por primera vez en 2024 una evaluación de las dependencias de la economía de la biodiversidad y servicios ecosistémicos, establece un dato para la economía y dice que en Colombia dependemos en un grado alto, mediano alto del 48% de la biodiversidad, y que nuestro Producto Interno Bruto de alguna manera necesita gestionar financiera, fiscalmente este tipo de procesos biológicos de los cuales dependemos tan grandemente. Entonces la evaluación nacional empieza a entrar no solamente como un elemento de generar directrices para políticas, sino que se vuelve inclusive elementos técnicos para decisiones fuertes en marcos fiscales. Este marco fiscal de Colombia va hasta 2030 y de alguna manera desde 2024 ya tenemos directrices claras de lo que debemos hacer en inversiones para biodiversidad. Ahora, es difícil para un país como Colombia en vía de desarrollo tener todo el presupuesto que se requiere. Aún las inversiones son muy bajas, pero por lo menos ya tenemos una claridad de cuánto se necesita o la magnitud de las inversiones que se deberían hacer para poder conservar y usar sosteniblemente la biodiversidad de cara a nuestros procesos económicos. Next slide. En ese segundo camino, lo que ya encontramos es que la evaluación nacional entonces pasa no solo de tener incidencia en política pública, sino que luego permea los procesos económicos y competitivos y productivos del país. Next, please. Entonces, en la siguiente diapositiva, lo que observan es cómo en Colombia empiezan a haber un montón de evaluaciones que empiezan a traer la biodiversidad hacia procesos económicos. Entonces, por ejemplo, la OCDE, que es la organización pues, de la cooperación de los estados miembros que se tiene a nivel económico, a nivel mundial, y que Colombia hace parte hace poco, logra hacer unas evaluaciones sobre el desempeño ambiental del país, pero los conecta con los procesos económicos. ¿Y esto qué hace? Que empiece Colombia a pensar que este tipo de ejercicios también tienen que hacerse a nivel nacional, no solamente vienen del nivel internacional, sino que vienen del nivel nacional. Y además esta última evaluación que se publica ahorita en 2026 cita directamente a la evaluación nacional de biodiversidad y servicios ecosistémicos como uno de los ejes principales para comparar y para poder medir qué está cambiando en la gestión de la biodiversidad en el país, y lo introduce directamente en estos aspectos competitivos. Next slide. En el siguiente, lo que hace Colombia es que viendo que la OCDE está observando este tipo de procesos, empieza a incorporar desde el 2024 en su informe nacional de competitividad, que es un informe que anualmente mide la competitividad del país, saca indicadores de innovación e indicadores de competitividad por regiones, por, digámoslo así, sistemas políticos administrativos, pues de alguna manera desde el 2024 saca un capítulo de crecimiento verde, y en este capítulo de crecimiento verde tomamos, de hecho, yo estaba trabajando en el Instituto Nacional de Biodiversidad de Colombia, que es el Instituto Alexander von Humboldt, y tomamos las directrices de la Evaluación Nacional de Biodiversidad para poder empezar a medir y generar índices como el índice de capital natural y compararlo con la competitividad o la innovación a nivel regional. Esto se está haciendo año a año. Hay tres versiones: 2024, 2025 y es año corrido. 2026 se saca a final de año. Entonces, esto lo estamos haciendo ya continuamente y es una forma en la que el país empieza a reflexionar cómo la productividad necesita conservar y manejar sosteniblemente la biodiversidad, no afectarla, y cómo de alguna manera esa productividad se vuelve competitiva cuando la biodiversidad se integra fuertemente en las estructuras de negocios y en las formas en las que las cadenas de valor son gestionadas. Next slide. En este proceso hay un tercer nivel o un tercer camino, y es ahora esto cómo llega a las empresas, cómo llega a los negocios. Tenemos en el primer nivel las políticas públicas que dan directrices de toma de decisiones y legislativas normativas. En el segundo, el nivel de análisis macroeconómico, productivo y competitivo del país. Y en el tercero ya cómo llega a nivel microeconómico, negocios y cadenas de valor. En este ejercicio, next slide. Efectivamente, lo que más nos ha funcionado en el país son dos estrategias muy fuertes. La primera estrategia es el trabajo en red, tener actores, en este caso tenemos de aliados a Biofin, que es una iniciativa de UNEP también, y que se alía con el sector empresarial, en este caso con la Asociación Nacional de Empresarios de Colombia, se alía con la academia y se establece unas directrices de biodiversidad y empresa para que las empresas empiecen a bajar claramente todo este lenguaje e introducirlo dentro de sus elementos de gestión corporativa. Next slide. En el siguiente proceso, lo que hacemos es que este tipo de directrices que se generan para las evaluaciones de sostenibilidad se convierten en directrices ahora de negocios. Y esta hoja de ruta biodiversidad de empresa que se construye desde la Asociación Nacional de Empresarios, el Ministerio de Ambiente de Colombia y todas las rondas de consultas que se hicieron en el país para construir la Estrategia Nacional de Biodiversidad para entregar a la COP16 y tener nuestro instrumento de gestión frente al marco común Montreal, pues efectivamente se crea toda una comitiva privada de empresas que participan en los procesos, que van con el Ministerio de Ambiente las consultas y que generan su propia hoja de ruta desde el punto de vista empresarial. Ya no es desde el punto de vista de las organizaciones especializadas, sino desde el punto de vista de las empresas. Entonces, en este instrumento, las empresas dicen cómo quieren seguir las metas, cumplir las metas del Marco Común Montreal, seguir sus implementaciones, seguir el plan y la estrategia de acción de biodiversidad del país y comprometerse. Entonces acá hay compromisos de los sectores industriales, compromisos de los sectores industriales de gas, de petróleo, de minería, de industria química, industria pulpa, papel y cartón, de agroindustria, de la gran diversidad de industrias que tenemos en el país, y empieza a volverse en acciones concretas. Ya son compromisos que las empresas empiezan a guiar, y todo esto viene bajo los lineamientos estructurales y transversales que hemos extraído de la evaluación nacional. Next slide. Acá uno de los grandes ejemplos que tenemos es que existe, y otra de las estrategias es, aparte de trabajar con instituciones en red, es trabajar con instituciones en la interfaz. Entonces, trabajamos con organizaciones que están en la interfaz ciencia política, y en eso Colombia creemos que estamos haciendo un buen trabajo porque tenemos varios institutos nacionales de biodiversidad para distintas regiones. El nacional es el Instituto Alexander von Humboldt, que hace esta función de la interfaz, modera el lenguaje científico académico y lo traduce en procesos de toma de decisiones, pero también existen desde el sector privado este tipo de interfaces, como son el Centro Nacional del Agua y la Biodiversidad, para el cual trabajo y el cual asesoro en términos de cómo impulsar la creación de soluciones basadas en la naturaleza para las empresas. Entonces tenemos una comunidad de práctica en este proceso. Hay unas estrategias transversales regionales que les llaman biodiversidad y desarrollo, donde todos los instrumentos nacionales asociados a la biodiversidad se bajan al territorio, se aglomeran empresas y se hacen alianzas y articulaciones público-privadas para la ejecución de las acciones que se han planteado en todos los instrumentos que ya les he mencionado. Entonces, estas organizaciones de interfaz facilitan esa movilidad del conocimiento disponible, las políticas existentes y las acciones en territorio. Tenemos otras iniciativas como las que les está mostrando el banner acá, que es la estrategia de datos abiertos de biodiversidad, donde las empresas se comprometen a que todos sus estudios, evaluaciones, reportes que capturan datos de biodiversidad deben ser publicados en un sistema interno de biodiversidad que le llamamos el SIF Colombia y que reporta al Global Biodiversity Information a nivel global. Por lo tanto, Colombia hoy en día es uno de los países que más reporta. En este instante, no sé si está en segundo o tercer lugar, pero es el país que es uno de los países que a nivel privado más datos aporta de biodiversidad, tanto al sistema interno colombiano como al sistema global de información de biodiversidad. Finalmente, buscamos que esto no solamente se quede en la generación de datos, toma de decisiones y acciones en territorio, sino que se conecte con la productividad y competitividad. Entonces conectamos estos ejercicios con procesos de bioeconomía, que es el otro ejercicio que yo hago en el Centro Nacional del Agua y la Biodiversidad, y con la gestión de servicios ecosistémicos como la estrategia de agua y desarrollo en territorios. Next slide, please. Acá, ya cerrando, otros de los ejemplos son dos de las grandes compañías que tiene Colombia, emblemáticas a nivel mundial, y es Ecopetrol, que es la empresa nacional de petróleos que tenemos, y es una de las empresas más grandes con la estrategia, de hecho, más llamativa que se tiene en el país en términos de gestión de biodiversidad. ¿Y esto qué significa? Significa que cuando tenemos empresas como Ecopetrol o empresas como Juan Valdez, o la Federación Nacional de Cafeteros, que son nuestra otra empresa emblemática en términos de producción cafetera y exportación de café a nivel mundial, pues efectivamente estas dos trabajan en introducir la biodiversidad en sus estrategias no solamente de sostenibilidad, sino sus estrategias productivas y sus estrategias de gestión. En el caso de Ecopetrol, más de gestión de la biodiversidad; en el caso de la Federación Nacional de Cafeteros, más de competitividad, porque se constituye la biodiversidad en un elemento competitivo. Y esto le llamamos empresas ancla. Y para nosotros, ¿cuál es la estrategia? Es que si tenemos grandes empresas o empresas emblemáticas en los sectores que acogen este tipo de estrategias y ellas las lideran, las otras empresas vienen detrás porque se genera un ejercicio de jalonamiento de las otras empresas que nos ha funcionado también en Colombia, y por eso les quería traer este ejemplo. Next slide. Finalmente, problemas también que se encuentran, o como los llamamos, oportunidades de mejora en el ejercicio. Next slide. Efectivamente, tenemos todavía problemas, por ejemplo, en los cambios de gobierno, porque logramos establecer en ciertos gobiernos unas estrategias mucho más fuertes, como fueron, por ejemplo, este gobierno que está, y en el anterior un poco también, bastante dedicadas, o sea, acciones fuertes alrededor de la biodiversidad, pero no siempre hay suficiente disponibilidad en términos de los gobernantes, disposición más bien de ejecutar, y se requiere tiempo para ese tipo de gestiones, y eso a veces genera brechas de implementación, mientras que los gobernantes llegan, entienden los procesos, logran de alguna manera estar convencidos de lo que hay que hacer y continuar con el proceso. Otro tema es la limitación de recursos financieros, que para Colombia el sector privado es uno de los grandes inversores. Sin embargo, la inversión privada es muy pequeña aún, y la inversión pública, aunque ha crecido, todavía es insuficiente. Entonces, la inversión, la financiación mixta o blended finance, necesitamos mejorarla en ese proceso. Hay ciertos stakeholders que todavía son difíciles de vincular, como las empresas medianas o pequeñas, porque efectivamente para ellas, sobre todo las que son emergentes, pequeñas, o que startups que están naciendo, todavía no tienen claridad de cómo gestionar la biodiversidad en sus negocios y les cuesta hacerlo. Y finalmente, aunque para nosotros en nuestro país hemos aprendido bastante de la vinculación de las comunidades locales e indígenas en los procesos de gestión de biodiversidad, se han vinculado principalmente en procesos de toma de datos, reportes, los llamamos monitores locales o biomonitores, y de alguna manera todavía nos falta permear mucho más la toma de decisiones desde la base. Es decir, que bottom up, que desde la base podamos hacer que la toma de decisiones influencie también a los sectores pues mucho más relevantes en términos de toma de decisiones en el país. Next slide. Um, Thank you. It's no more for me.
Thank you very much, Mario, for sharing those very interesting examples.
It's a pleasure, Pratik.
Thank you very much for sharing those very interesting examples from Colombia. It was particularly valuable to hear how ecosystem assessment findings have informed business strategies, national policy frameworks, and broader discussions around competitiveness and economic planning. And I love how you framed problems into opportunities. That was excellent. Thank you. We will now move to our second country example from Grenada. And I am very pleased to introduce Chris Davis. Chris is currently the president of the board of Grenada Land Actors, an organization campaigning for transparency and accountability in sustainable land management in Grenada. Chris participated in the Grenada National Ecosystem Assessment process and played an important role in ensuring that the Citizens Guide to the assessment was developed. Today, Chris will speak about how civil society in Grenada has used ecosystem assessment findings to support advocacy, public awareness, and community action. Chris, thank you so much for making time to join us for the webinar today. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Pratik. And again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. Yes, so the Citizens Guide was requested at our first meeting with the consultants, Canary, who are from Trinidad and Tobago, and members of civil society felt that, we needed to spend a great deal of time. We often get called to meetings and consultations about policy by government, by different people in government and different departments of government. But we very rarely get to see or get to read most of the policy documents that are produced, obviously because they're often huge tomes of literature, 400, 500 pages. But also they are written in language that is often kind of not accessible to ordinary people who don't have, MAs and MScs and PhDs. So that's why we asked very clearly at our initial meeting that we get a citizen's guide, something that would be written in the language that we could access and that we could then use in our advocacy and our training, our information sharing, our capacity building. And for us, we were really fortunate that Canary had been chosen to carry out the work because their methodology is very focused on the bottom-up approach. So they were happy to accommodate, our request of enabling people like us to be able to use a document such as this. So their methodology, allows for everybody's voices to be heard. And for me, one of the celebratory aspects of the NEA and consequently the guide is that Indigenous knowledge from often neglected parts of the community was included. And this was carried out by young fellows, young people who were given some training in how to interview and talk to and ask simple questions so that people could have could answer in their language. And this resulted in the young fellows obviously learning a great deal about biodiversity in Grenada. And because several of these people and quite a number of these young people, would go back to their everyday occupations in the week. But in their spare time, they were doing this kind of research for Canary and for Grenada. So again, as I say, they learned a great deal. And they were also trained and given clear directions about how to engage with different communities. And this resulted in the voices of Rastas, elders, young people, all being incorporated into the study, which ultimately gives everyone an insight into the plants and herbs for culinary and medicinal purposes. And this is one of the aspects, I think, which is kind of dying out unless, we make every effort to include it in printed literature, basically. And that's what's happened with this kind of information with Grenada. It is now incorporated into the NEA and consequently the People's Guide. And it's now published literature through the NEA, and subsequently everybody gets to be able to access it. Next slide. So Grenada Land Actors, as Pratik introduced us, we are championing basically the sustainable use of land in Grenada, sustainable development of land in Grenada. And because we're championing this, we noticed that planning applications were not applying themselves to looking at impact on the environment when they were approving planning applications. And this was particularly for 3 mega resorts that have now been built. 2 mega resorts have almost finished, and the other one is still in the making. These mega resorts, have and are still destroying our mangroves. The one in Levra in the north of the island in St. Patrick's is also the place where we have our turtles coming in, our leatherback turtles. And as we all know, they're an endangered species. So when we saw this happening, and the other resort is in La Sagesse, which is in the south of the island, which is also very has ancient burial sites, which were once again not researched properly before they built this resort in the south. And the third one is in Mount Hartman, which is a huge. And these were all the Mount Hartman and the Levra sites were supposed to be national parks, but unfortunately none of them were gazetted. So they managed to kind of turn that around and make them and approve these mega sites to be built. And in Mount Hartman in St. George's is also one of the sites for our Grenada dove, which is again endangered. So when GLA saw all of this happening without particular regard for the environment, we challenged the planning authority in court. And we had minor victories in that the planning department have now got to keep a public register that everybody can access, which is one thing that they weren't doing properly before. And also that the judge quashed the approval for the golf course in Levra and for the lagoon in La Sagesse. Unfortunately, the lagoon in La Sagesse is completed, and they are appealing against the judgment. We are also appealing against the judgment. GLA is appealing against the judgment because we feel that the judge's verdict didn't really appreciate how important consultation for communities are, or the fact that EIAs are crucial for developments to be approved in these very ecologically sensitive areas. So at the moment, that's where we are with the court case. GLA, consequently, because of the publicity around our court cases, we've been asked to support several other communities who are opposing developments in their backyard. One is an industrial development, and two of them are industrial developments, and others again are kind of hotel development on a smaller scale, but still detrimental to our coastal zones. You know, in that when you're building in coastal areas, most of the time you're building in a mangrove or very close to a mangrove, which has implications. Implications for us because we're a tiny island state. And this has implications, you know, when we're thinking about climate change and natural disasters. You know, our mangroves are, I'm sure everybody knows who was listening to this webinar, you know, they're our front line against hurricanes, sea surges. So we have to defend them. We have to keep putting it out there how important they are for our sustainability. Next slide. Yes, I think these pictures actually show the beginning and the after of Levra, the Levra site. As you can see, it was an amazing mangrove. It's an ancient mangrove. I think the NEA actually decided that it was probably about 5,000, 6,000 years old. And the after picture shows you exactly what they've done to it, which is, well, I saw an emoji then of people crying, and that's exactly what it makes you do. Next slide. Yeah, part of the other findings that of us becoming more popular and visible in the public eye is that we've been asked to present courses at the tertiary college at TAMCC and at the University here. And these, you know, these presentations use the information provided by the NEA and also the Citizens Guide, because these are fairly new courses and haven't been run before. We also use the SGAN agreements, you know, influence and future development, for these teachings and for these information sharing that we do, because particularly with young people, we feel that, you know, they are the future and they need to be informed and to be able to make informed choices as they will become the future policymakers. So it's important for us that we get into these tertiary colleges and universities, because otherwise we are going to keep seeing progress as buildings and concrete instead of appreciating that our natural resources are just as important. As the person from Colombia was just saying, you know, being able to incorporate the value of our natural resources has to become, you know, top line for any kind of policy development. And even though Grenada is getting there, we're getting there very slowly. You know, unfortunately, I feel like we focus on getting the dollar, chasing the dollar, if you like, rather than appreciating what we have as a natural resource, and using that for development of ecotourism. We still tend to focus on, you know, creating big resorts and buildings, which, as I have to say, it is a new development for Grenada. We didn't have huge resorts previously before 2020, I think. They were all kind of built very ecologically, you know, in tune with our environment. However, that has changed in the last few years, and it's not conducive. It's not conducive to a small island state like this.
I'm sorry, Chris, to interrupt you. Just to flag that we just have a few more minutes, and I would kindly request if you could please wrap up your session in a few more minutes. Thank you.
Okay. I think I need the next slide now. Yes. Yes, one of the major lessons that we learned is to keep lobbying, keep advocating with the policymakers. And one of the activities that we have been really, really following up on is debushing. Debushing is an activity where people are employed seasonally to cut back on our roadsides. And as you can see from the picture, unfortunately, people, in my mind, are not trained properly to do this activity and tend to, take the roadsides back way too far, which creates in itself natural hazards. Because when these vegetation and trees are cut back on these roadsides, when we have rain and rainstorms, we are then at risk of flooding, of rock falls, because in some areas we have a lot of rocks on the sides of the roads. And when these are, when the earth around them is taken away, then it makes them even more, even much more of a hazard, because they are at risk of falling down into the road onto road users. So as you may appreciate, this is not good practice. And what's happened is that government has understood what we're talking about and is now running training courses in agriculture as well for people who are doing this kind of seasonal work, so that they can be more protective of our ecosystems and our biodiversity rather than destructive. Thank you, Pratik. So yes, this is our QR code if you want to download the Citizens Guide to the NEA in Grenada. And I'm hoping that everybody asks for one, because it is very useful to have. Back to you, Pratik.
Thank you very much, Chris. It was extremely valuable to hear how the Citizens Guide has helped make Grenada assessment more accessible and useful for civil society organizations and local communities in Grenada. We will now move to our final country presentation from Thailand. Our final speaker today is Dr. Pech. Pech is a Thai conservation scientist with over 20 years of experience in biodiversity research, protected area management, and conservation science training. He is the project manager currently for the Thailand National Ecosystem Assessment and has been leading the assessment process since its inception. He is also an advisor to Thailand's Department of Marine and Coastal Resources. Today, Petch will discuss how the Thailand National Ecosystem Assessment could be used across different sectors such as tourism, fisheries, coastal management, and sustainable development planning. Dr. Petch, thank you very much for making time today to join us for the webinar. You're welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Pratik. Good evening from Bangkok. So it's a bit late here. So hope you are having a good time across the world. It's a pleasure to share Thailand experience on the NEA, particularly how we are using it not just as a report, but as a platform to support evidence-based policy making. And I'm speaking following Colombia and Grenada, and I think it is our aspiration as well to really kind of push toward private sector as well as the civil society. And I can already see there's quite a lot of similarity in terms of our aspiration to use the NEA in those fronts. So I will briefly touch on 4 aspects how NEA is shaping policy thinking, where we see strongest opportunity for uptake, and what we mean by early or soft policy influence, because Thailand, we are toward the end of the technical assessment process. So it's actually not yet in terms of like using it, but I think we taking it in the thinking from the outset. So can I have the slide, please? Yep. Next slide. So first of all, Thailand's NEA, we focus on marine and coastal ecosystem, which are central to biodiversity, climate resilience, and livelihood. At the same time, these systems are also under increasing pressure from fishery, tourism, and coastal development. But one of the core challenges we face is fragmentation, whether it's policy and decision are often made by sector, while ecosystem function as integrated system. So NEA play an important role in reframing this challenge. It helps shift the perspective from seeing ecosystem as an environmental issue to recognizing them as a national natural capital, so foundational to long-term economic and social development. Next slide, please. So I think from the outset, the NEA in Thailand, we designed not as a static report because indeed, we do have ecosystem assessment report also as a mandate for the department that in charge, but we design it as a decision support platform. So there are 3 or 4 elements, I think, from using it as a static scientific document, but our approach is really much participatory through our lead author, through the trialogue processes, and also trying to have it participatory decision support process. And I think in terms of the focus, it's also it's explicitly linked ecosystem condition to drivers and pressure to policy responses. So this allows policymakers to look beyond symptoms and address root causes. Although it's still a long road, I think, but I think in terms of the design, we set it out that way. Second, it also integrated multiple knowledge system, and I think that is very different from previous ecosystem assessment, which is purely rely on scientific data, but we try to integrate multiple knowledge system, bringing together scientific evidence with indigenous and local knowledge, which is especially important in coastal context. And third, we also use scenario act as a strategic bridge, helping decision makers to understand trade-off, risk, and long-term consequences of different development choices. And I think in this sense, NEA not only about understanding the present, but it's about informing future decision under uncertainty. Next, please. So the architecture or very much the technical report, we have about 8 main chapter: introduction, status and trend, and then moving on to driver pressure, economic, which is kind of central to mainstream the issue of biodiversity. The 5th on ILK, which is quite prominent because it is really kind of important additional to a normal process. We have scenario. We also have pilot site to test it out into coastal provinces, which is very different. One in the main tourism area, one in one with the more small-scale fishery dominant. And then the governance, which is pretty much in terms of the how do we see the solution. Next slide, please. So in terms of I think strategic lever for policy influence, I think 3 main ways that we can see. First, as a strategic level, as I already mentioned, so it elevates ecosystem into national priority by framing marine and coastal system as natural capital. It's connect biodiversity with other aspects: climate adaptation, economic planning, and emerging blue economy. And second, it helps move decision-making upstream. So rather focusing on ecosystem decline, the NEA try to identify the drivers behind it, whether in fishery management, tourism development, or coastal infrastructure, which is critical for enabling policy reform across sector. And I think it is really fundamental because oftentimes we trying to work within the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, but we know that most of the time threats are coming from across ministry when they don't really recognize, the importance of biodiversity and ecosystem services. So how do we? Sorry. domestic violence. My dog and cat start to fight. Usually they are very peaceful. So third, it support long-term planning. I think through scenario analysis, the NEA allow policymakers to explore different future, understanding trade-off between development pathway and ecosystem sustainability. I think that is particularly relevant for planning toward the big year in 2030 and also beyond, like 2050. I think that really kind of our influence in terms of policy, although in the short term, we can see that there's a lot of still, contradictory in terms of main development pathway in country. But I can see that NEA should provide some of the strong basis for civil society to also maybe fight with some of the policy that's still conducting the trend. Next, please. Yeah, I think scenario audit is the main scenario that we have tried to work participatory with also many stakeholder, business as usual, so grounded in past trend and current challenges. And I think we all agree with that the business as usual is actually not an option, it's more present itself as a risk. So we really strongly recommend the decision maker to move toward blue economy growth, balancing utilization and sustainability, or even better with the time bound to 2030 as a big year. How do we really elevate the conservation focus to have a nature positive goal? So prioritizing regeneration and resilience. Next, please. In terms of integrating knowledge system, so we test it out in the area called Ao Kung in Phuket. So this is a collaboration also with GISTA, which is using the spatial data from the satellite, combining foundational scientific data with indigenous and local knowledge, also using marine GI portal, geographic information. So this enables participatory and digital marine resource mapping, directly engaging over 25 local participants to capture real-world coastal dynamic. Next, please. And I think throughout the co-production of the result has really been the key as well, from scenario workshop to our pilot site, the field work in Ao Kung area, and probably the highlight would be the national trialogue as well. So we have gathered almost 100 people across science, policy, and practice to validate findings, share perspective, and also trying to shape policy integration as well. So we have a senior level management people from the ministry, from the main agency that in charge for marine and coastal system to participate throughout. Next, please. Another one is also empowering the next generation. I think throughout the NEA process, we presented the NEA from the scoping report and also the preliminary result at the biannual National Marine Science Symposium. First one in Bangkok and the last one in Trang. So engaged over 45 early career scientists. Also integrating NEA theme into academic discussion through collaboration with major marine science university across Thailand. Next, please. And one of very important thing is also the governance. I think it's more strategic rather than administrative. And I think this early ownership is critical for policy uptake. The main agency that is a focal point within the government is the Office of Natural Resources and Environment Policy and Planning. And then we work with Department of Marine and Coastal Resources and key agency. Also trying to really have the the influence or leverage in the permanent national biodiversity platform, which is in Thailand. We call it National Committee on Conservation and Sustainable Use of Biodiversity. And I think this has done two important things. So it's ensure alignment with national policy priority throughout the process and also create early ownership among policymakers. So instead of just presenting finding at the end, policymakers have been engaged from the beginning. And I think in addition, NEA also help initiate discussion around strengthening the national biodiversity platform, building on existing institutional structure. So definitely, I think throughout this governance arrangement and institutional arrangement, so NEA contributing not only to knowledge, but also to institutional continuity for science and policy interface. Next, please. And I think when we look at what sector would be most likely in terms of the policy uptake, we identify, I think, 4 sectors. The marine spatial planning stand out as a key entry point. It provides mechanism to integrate conservation, fishery, tourism, and infrastructure. And in Thailand, it's still evolving institutionally. So NEA can help provide both evidence-based and policy rationale to strengthen this one. The fishery is another important area, especially the NEA try to link ecosystem condition with food security and livelihood, supporting ecosystem-based management. Although during the time of the NEA, a few of us also lead author has to really provide some strong argument about the fishery law reform, which seem to go backward rather than progress. So I think this link indirectly with the NEA process as well, because we try to show that how ecosystem is really linked with the food security and through fishery practices. Tourism and coastal development is another area. It's very critical in Thailand. It's a major driver of ecosystem change and also very important economically as well. So the government tend to listen to this sector. So NEA help make visible the cumulative impact and trade-off involved from tourism development. And national planning, the NEA result is also directly providing input into the NBSAP, the SDG, and also the National Blue Economy Strategy. Next, please. As I mentioned, so in Thailand, it's just in the process of finalizing the technical report, but it's, I think, the soft uptake or early uptake is already begin, since the shaping the national dialogue and aligning institutional priority. So some of the things that the government is doing already, but maybe missing out, for example, the ecosystem report that they have been producing, but has largely overlooked the importance of ILK and local knowledge. So this one, NEA really trying to change that. It also helped informing NBSAP revision and preparing Thailand 7 national report to the CBD. Third one is also help validating policy recommendation directly with decision maker via the national trialogue. Next, please. So the road ahead, we just coming out from the finalization. So in the process of dissemination, translating the finding into policy brief, launching national workshop, and deploying, including like mobile exhibition in coastal area that we have 2 major pilot sites. And hopefully, so that is not the end, the implementation about mobilizing resources and partnering with UNDP BestNet Solution Fund for the next phase of structural support and policy execution. Next, please. So I think this sum it up in terms of key lesson for evidence-based policy, the importance of engage policy maker early on and also continuously from day one to build the ownership. the assessment also must be structured around policy relevant questions. So it is, I think, from the outset, how do we design the scoping report to address the relevant policy question. Scenario is also proven to be a good and powerful tool for decision making. So it supports forward-looking choices rather than just looking back in terms of ecosystem decline. Anchor the project institutionally. So for example, in Thailand, the UNEP, which is a think tank, and also the CBD focal point is a main agency that liaises with us through the NEA process. Last one, the stakeholder engagement as co-production to build widespread legitimacy. So I think this is broad stakeholder engagement, strengthen legitimacy and uptake of the report. And we also really hope to be able to produce a citizen guide, like just Grenada, to make sure that the finding and the key messages from the NEA are much more widely available to all different groups. Next slide, please. I think just the last one. So yeah, okay. Just I think the partner and acknowledgement, I think, and also just to conclude that the Thailand NEA demonstrate that the impact of an ecosystem assessment does not begin at the publication, I think, but it's begin during the process. It's not only about producing better evidence, but about building the relationships, institutions, and trust that allow that evidence to be used later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Pech. I particularly found it very insightful when you shared that national ecosystem assessments don't only produce evidence, but are also responsible for in creating those enabling conditions for utilization of those evidences. So that was really insightful to hear. Thank you. And I think we've had some really excellent, insightful country experiences today, and due to which we are running out of time. And unfortunately, we will not be able to do the Mentimeter exercise, which we are really looking forward to. But we will still find a way to hear and listen to your thoughts as well from the audience. We will now move into the panel discussion, and I would really encourage all webinar attendees to please ask your questions to our panel members using the Q&A tab, or you can also just now insert your questions directly in the chat. And I would like to begin a question with Chris first. And Chris, looking ahead, what are some of the next priorities for ensuring that the Grenada NEA can be used for further public awareness and community action?
What we're doing now is that we're getting it onto the curriculum in schools. There's been a kind of a revisiting of the school curriculum so that some of the NEA can be incorporated and some, obviously, the Citizens Guide. And also what we found is that when young people are doing their SBAs, their kind of end of term papers and stuff, there's been a lot more inquiries about biodiversity, ecosystems. So again, you can see we're targeting young people because, as I said before, they are the future policymakers. There's a sense that maybe we need to start with them rather than focus on old heads. Go with the young heads, if you get my meaning.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you again, Chris. Now everybody can hear.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. And I will now turn to Patch. Patch, could you tell us a little bit about what are some of the communication products or outreach approaches that could be considered to make the findings from the Thailand NEA more accessible to different stakeholders in the country?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we seriously thinking about a citizen guide version of the NEA, because I think in Thailand the civil society sector are quite strong as well. You have many small scale fishery organization, people who working on coastal livelihood. There would be a very likely champion to make sure that the finding from the NEA has been used. I can mention that the government, they still have the idea about this promoting a big infrastructure development in northern Andaman Sea, which is critically important in terms of marine and coastal resources. So I'm sure that the finding from the NEA about how this ecosystem is not just the environmental issue, but it's a long-term economic development requirement would be very much useful for the civil society to make a case in that sense. And I think another part that we also like to follow Colombia is also the business sector as well, because they have been involved from the early stage in the NEA too, the Global Compact, and which is a representation of many companies that have been very active in terms of biodiversity finance. But still, there's no strong connection yet how those investments from private sector can translate into the meaningful outcome, moving from like CSR to more like long-term investment. That's what we hope. I think an NEA would be an excellent platform as well to bring in kind of this science policy bridging with the private sector. So those are the two areas that we hope to be able to continue. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prech. And I just wanted to quickly flag that we have a question for you in the Q&A tab, which I think you can see and maybe type an answer. However, I do have a very interesting question in the Q&A, and I wanted to bring that to the attention of everybody and open that question to all the panelists today. And the question is, how can countries with limited data availability start a national ecosystem assessment, especially in regions like the Southwest Mediterranean, where some ecosystems are still understudied? So I would now leave the floor open for any of our panel members if you want to take the first initiative in answering.
Well, I think, again, it's through advocacy and lobbying of your national government. I think that, ultimately they're the ones to lead this kind of thing. But you have to let people know that this is an important investment in your country's future. So, people need to lobby your environmental department or whoever it is you think is looking at your sustaining your natural resources. So they are the people I would go to first. And obviously take as many people from civil society with you at the same time.
Thank you, Chris. Mario, Pech, if you wanted to jump in and share any reflections.
Yeah, I think now, the central database provide quite useful, starting point as well, in terms of like remote sensing, the satellite data, all that becoming much more accessible. And I think if you link it with the educational institute, normally it's sort of buried within the institution, but no one really kind of connect the dot about what has been done. And I think it would be another thing that if you kind of look through what available in the global database, and then more kind of, separate study within the university, usually you start to have sort of a good skeleton of where to go from there. And I'm pretty sure actually there's a lot more study that we know of, but it just hasn't been, put in place or linked to the policy. So I'm pretty confident I think right now a lot more information is actually much more accessible. So definitely we can start somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, Pratik, for my own, I think that it's possible to start an evaluation that say, Dr. Pech, with the data is available in this moment in the databases, but that said to Dr. Pech, the important thing is connect the network of stakeholders that needs to understand how biodiversity is vinculated with all the levels of the tech decisions. I mean, we need to understand how biodiversity is vinculated with the public sectors. We need to understand how biodiversity is necessary for economic growth. We need to understand how biodiversity is necessary for management, sustainable management in business. And when you connect all the network, it's possible to do many things with the data available. You don't need a big expression of data for the analysis. You need the intention. And with the intention and the network, it's possible to start. For me, is the first step. Create a network of stakeholders that start that kind of thing. And the other hand, it's possible with the data, for example, in Anchor, it's possible with the data available in global biodiversity information. And in this moment, around the world, we have many platforms with excessive information, maybe a macro level. But with that macro level is a first step. And then you can create the national assessments through the steps on how you can go down and create strategies for go the middle level and micro level. This is my idea.
I also would like to add that where no formal data available is actually the local knowledge can also
Yeah.
providing very critical information as well. But normally it has been overlooked or somehow not compiling in a meaningful way. So I think those are something that we can also really highlight about what we learned through our process.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yes, actually, I want to agree with that because that was one of the quite important aspects of the NEA in Grenada was the indigenous knowledge and work, talking to rastas and the elders about the information that they were holding. So yes, as you say, that's a really good place to start.
Thank you all for addressing the question so insightfully for us. And we will take one final question now. And after that, we'll proceed to the closing remarks for the webinar by Vanita. And I think maybe Vanita, if you want, if you're comfortable, you can take the lead in answering this question as well. So the question is, as a student in marine biology from a developing country, what practical steps can I take to contribute to ecosystem assessments or make an impact locally?
Thank you, Pratik. Well, it depends because this is a national ecosystem assessment we're talking about, which starts with the policy will and support from government. So it's the government which is going to be requesting or organizing, let's say, the process, right, of developing these assessments. So it's within the country to organize the team of experts who are going to be participating in the assessment development, and they might open a call or select some people. So it will depend. As I said, it's a country-driven process. So it will depend maximum of how the country will decide how to move forward. And there are different types of contributions. There are authors that are leading the chapters, there are contributors with case studies, with information, but there are also people who is volunteering in a different way as a student or as a fellow. So it depends on how the process is profiled in the country, but there might be different ways of participating as well, also in the discussions, in the workshops, and other ways. It depends on each of the countries.
Thank you, Vanita. And so that brings us to the close of today's Q&A and panel discussion. Thank you all for your excellent questions. And thank you as well to our speakers today for joining us today. And I would also like to thank Laura from our events team, who's been really supporting us from the background for the webinar. So I will now finally hand over to Vanita once again for some final reflections and closing remarks. So Vanita, one final time to you. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pratik. Well, we have been listening to this excellent example, right? And I think that the common one of the commonalities of the change of experiences is that the national ecosystem assessment goes beyond maybe a very technical exercise, bringing different views and different people and stakeholders. And that is very, very important that once these assessments are developed, there is a need to use the assessment findings, right? Just to think about these documents and processes as live documents and processes, and that still need to be updated, keep continuing, challenging themselves, let's say, in different scenarios to bring different levels of policies, stakeholders, businesses, and all the people, society in general, to make use of the assessment information and findings. It was very interesting in the case of Maria, when you were saying how these processes also resulted in another different assessments and other processes. And we have also the experience of Chris saying, we then developed something different as a summary for policymakers, right? We developed something called the guidance for citizen society. And then how all these capacities that were gained in the assessment process is also something that we should not forget. Is we are not only taking about in consideration the report or the findings, but also all the capacities that have been built during the process, the stakeholder engagement process, through making it more participatory and inclusive, bringing different knowledge systems, and also empowering people from the beginning in the assessment, making them owning the results for them to then apply this assessment in their own sector or project and life. Then how Dr. Pej also was highlighting that the value, or one of the values of assessments, is not only to inform, right, the decisions and processes, but also to understand the complexity and the need to cross-cutting the biodiversity in different scenarios in all our life, actually, and how this responds to better development and well-being. The importance of strengthening the policy science and practice, and then with the society, of course, and moving from just understanding to the biodiversity's challenges and society and development challenges, but also getting into the action and transformation. Long-term planning was also very highlighted during the presentations. And I would say that you also gave us examples of how we were co-creating, co-producing, right, the assessment. And I will just say that we are here to call on the co-implementation and uptake as well of the assessment results. This is not just something about the people that was working in the assessment and there is their responsibility, or just bringing the report in a way that politicians could then take actions if needed. I think that there is a responsibility of all of us when we take decisions in what the assessment is highlighting as important. And with that, I think that thank you very much, because these cases have been very inspiring, and what we are seeing is that we keep learning with the different examples. There's different ways to approach different audiences as well, from the youth with the schools up to the tourism and more bigger companies, as Mario was suggesting there, with the Federación de Cafeteros, with the Coffee People Federation, and petrol big companies, right? And I think that the way the National Ecosystem Assessment is aligning people, just bringing everybody together, just working into one of the goals, that is actually to protect biodiversity and nature. So with this, I will just finish by thanking the participation of everyone in this webinar, especially our donor, the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Climate Action, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety of Germany, and the International Climate Initiative, ICI, who have been funding the initiative, Ecosystem Assessment Initiative, and of course, the development of the ecosystem assessment, the national ecosystem assessments we have heard from. I would also like to thank our consortium partners, UNDP and UNESCO from the Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services Network, for all the support that they have given to the initiative and countries in terms of stakeholder engagement and the inclusion of traditional knowledge and indigenous knowledge. And all of you, thank you very much. Just an invitation for you to join the Subglobal Assessment Network with this code here that you can see in the slide, which is a community of practice that connects a broader people interested in ecosystem assessments and who will share as well with you opportunities and experiences and lessons learned. So welcome everyone to join this bigger community of practice. Thank you very much, and wish you all the best. And hope to see you soon. You will have the record available of this webinar in our website of the National Ecosystem Assessment very soon. And have a lovely rest of your day or night. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Take care. Thank you.